It was a Tuesday morning in Portland, Oregon, and the rain had only just stopped. A pale light filtered through the blinds of the Dawson family's modest suburban home, casting stripes across the kitchen table where Angela Dawson sat with her laptop and a cooling mug of coffee. Angela was a woman of discipline. 17 years as a bookkeeper had made her meticulous about numbers, routines, and balance sheets. Every Tuesday morning, she checked the family's accounts, especially the savings account she had built carefully for her twin daughter's college education. That account was her pride and her anchor. For nearly 2 decades, she had denied herself vacations, worn the same coats until the seams frayed, and worked overtime every tax season just to put away what she could. While her colleagues talked about weekend getaways or new cars, Angela thought of tuition payments, housing deposits, and student fees. All those sacrifices were condensed into one figure she knew by heart, the amount earmarked for Madison and Olivia's future. She opened the banking app almost absent-mindedly, expecting to see the familiar 7-digit balance that had grown year after year. But instead, the screen refreshed and her breath caught in her throat. The number was 0, not a penny, $0. At first she thought it was a glitch, an app error, maybe a server issue. She refreshed the page once, then again, her fingers trembling harder each time. The zeros didn't move. They stared back at her like a cruel joke, mocking 17 years of sacrifice. Her hand shook so badly that the mug slipped from her grasp and shattered against the tiled floor, sending shards skittering under the cabinets. Coffee spread across the linoleum in dark rivulets. Angela's mind raced. She had scrimped and saved through layoffs, through rising rent, through the lean years when Michael's construction work slowed. All that money, every sacrifice, every denied treat for herself, gone, wiped away in an instant. She fumbled for her phone, her breath coming fast, and dialed Michael's number. Her husband had been a project supervisor at a mid-sized construction company for years. He had access to accounts, yes, but never this one. Not this sacred fund. She pressed call. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. "Michael, pick up," she whispered hoarsely into the phone. "This is urgent. Something's wrong with the savings account. All the money, it's gone. Call me back, please." She dropped the phone on the table, staring blankly at the screen of her laptop. Her heart pounded so violently that she felt lightheaded. How was she supposed to tell the girls? Madison dreamed of medical school. Olivia had been working toward a future in computer science since she was 12. Angela had promised them both that money would never be the obstacle she had faced when she was young. And now, in one morning, their future had evaporated. Her thoughts spiraled. Had the bank made an error? Had someone hacked the account? Fraud? Or... Angela swallowed hard. Could Michael have done something? He had always been responsible, maybe a little distant lately, but he couldn't. She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes, trying to stop the tears before they spilled over. That was when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Madison appeared first, slinging her backpack onto the counter with her usual composed demeanor. At 17, she was already a mirror of her mother. Dark hair tied neatly back, serious brown eyes sharpened with quiet determination. She smiled faintly a normal good morning, as though nothing in the world was wrong. Right behind her came Olivia, nose buried in her phone, earbuds hanging loose. The more restless twin. Olivia always had an energy about her, quick to laugh, quick to frown, fingers tapping as if coding even in her sleep. She set her phone down just long enough to pour a glass of juice, glancing at her mother briefly. Angela must have looked pale. Her hands were still shaking, her eyes swollen with unshed tears, because both girls froze mid-movement and turned to stare. "Mom." Madison asked quietly, picking up on the tension immediately. Angela opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. How could she explain? How could she tell them that their dreams, everything they had worked toward, had just been stolen away? The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until Olivia slipped out her earbuds and narrowed her eyes. What happened? Angela finally forced the words out, her voice breaking. The account. The college savings account. It's gone. Every dollar. 17 years. All of it. She braced herself for screaming, for tears, for outrage. But instead, something unexpected happened. Madison and Olivia looked at each other. No panic, no confusion. Just a brief, silent exchange, as if they had been waiting for this moment. And then, slowly, their expressions shifted into something Angela couldn't quite read. Not fear, not shock. A faint smile flickered across Olivia's lips. Madison's eyes hardened with an almost unsettling calm. Angela's chest tightened. Why weren't they reacting? Why weren't they terrified like she was? What did they know that she didn't? The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken, heavy with unspoken words. Angela stared at her daughters, trying to decipher the look in their eyes. It was a look that left her with a sudden, chilling thought. Her world was collapsing, and somehow her children weren't surprised. Angela sat frozen at the kitchen table, expecting her daughters to break down in tears, to demand answers she could not give. 17 years of savings gone in a single morning. Surely the weight of that revelation would crush them. Yet Madison and Olivia exchanged a quick glance, and instead of panic, Madison spoke with a calmness that startled her mother. "Don't worry, Mom," she said steadily. "We'll handle it." Angela blinked, certain she had misheard. What do you mean you'll handle it? Do you understand what I just told you?" Olivia rested a hand lightly on Angela's shoulder, as if she were the adult comforting a child. "It's okay. Just trust us. Everything's going to be fine." Her words only deepened Angela's dread. Trust us? How could they be so composed when everything had collapsed? She had expected screaming, accusations, maybe even despair. Instead, they offered reassurance, their voices calm, their faces unreadable. Angela tried to press them for answers, but they only repeated the same words. "Don't worry, trust us, it will all work out." And then they grabbed their backpacks and headed out the door for school, leaving Angela sitting among the shards of her broken coffee mug, staring at the empty balance on her laptop screen. The day that followed was torture. Angela felt as if the walls of the house were closing in on her. She called Michael's phone again and again, 17 times in total, but each call went unanswered, sent straight to voicemail. With every failed attempt, her panic deepened. Finally, she dialed the bank's customer service line, her voice shaking as she explained the missing funds. The representative was polite, patient, but the answer made Angela's blood run cold. The withdrawals had been processed using a power of attorney. Angela froze. Years ago, when Michael had been traveling frequently for work, she had signed a limited authorization so he could handle small account matters in her absence. Pay bills, move modest sums between checking and savings. But this account? This was supposed to be untouchable, safeguarded for their daughter's future. "I'd like to dispute the transactions," Angela insisted. "I understand, ma'am," the representative said carefully. "But from our records, these were authorized under the power of attorney we have on file. It appears the account holder designated your husband with access. Unless there's evidence of fraud or forgery, I'm afraid the transactions are considered valid." Angela's heart pounded in her ears. Fraud, forgery. The words echoed like distant thunder. Could Michael really have taken everything? Her stomach turned as she hung up the phone, pressing her hand to her mouth to stop from being sick. By mid-afternoon, she was pacing the living room like a caged animal, her mind racing in circles. Why weren't the girls more upset? Why had they spoken as though they expected this? Angela felt suddenly like the only one in the house who didn't understand what was happening. The day dragged on, each hour stretching endlessly. She reheated coffee she never drank, refreshed the banking app compulsively even though she knew nothing would change. Zero stared back at her each time, a cruel, unwavering reminder. When the front door finally opened that evening and Madison and Olivia walked in, Angela nearly collapsed with relief. The girls exchanged another one of those wordless glances that had haunted her all day, then set their bags down and sat across from her at the table. Their expressions were serious now, the fleeting smirks of the morning replaced by something heavier, older. "Mom," Madison began softly, "there's something we need to tell you. It's about Dad." Angela felt her throat tighten. She had spent the whole day praying the bank was wrong, that there was some clerical error, some mistake that could be fixed with a phone call. But looking at her daughters now, their grave eyes, their steady posture, she knew what was coming would shatter her far more than a line of zeros on a screen. Olivia opened her laptop, sliding it onto the table. "You deserve the truth. We didn't want to hurt you, but you need to know what we found." The room seemed to shrink around Angela. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, every sound felt amplified in the silence. She gripped the edge of the table, bracing herself, as Madison drew a deep breath and continued. "It's about Dad," she repeated, "and what he's been doing behind your back." Angela's heart lurched. In that moment, she understood that the missing money was only the beginning. The true devastation was still to come, and it would cut far deeper than numbers on a bank statement. Madison's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a heaviness beyond her years. "It started a few months ago," she began. "I was working on a history paper, and my laptop completely crashed. Dad told me I could use his computer in the office. I thought nothing of it, but when I opened the browser to print, his email was already logged in." Angela felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to stop her daughter, to say that she didn't need to hear the rest, but something inside told her she had to. "At first, I thought I clicked the wrong button," Madison continued, "but his inbox popped up, and there were dozens of unread messages. The first one I saw," she hesitated, glancing at her sister for support. "It wasn't work. It was personal. From Vanessa Carter." Angela's pulse hammered. She knew the name. Vanessa was the young assistant she had seen once or twice at company events, no older than 25, always laughing a little too loudly at Michael's jokes. Angela remembered the way Michael's eyes followed her across the room, though she had forced herself to dismiss it at the time. Olivia leaned forward, her tone sharper, more matter-of-fact. "It wasn't just one message. We found hundreds. 7 months' worth. They weren't just flirting. They were making plans, trips together, a new apartment, even marriage. He told her he couldn't wait to leave and start fresh." Angela pressed her hand to her mouth, while rising in her throat. 7 months. While she had been working late to keep the household afloat, he had been building a second life. "But that's not all," Olivia went on. She pulled up a folder on her laptop, the glow of the screen casting her face in cold light. "I set his email notifications to forward copies. Every time he got a receipt, a transfer confirmation, anything related to the bank, I saved it. Look at this." Angela leaned in, and the numbers blurred before her eyes. Thousands of dollars at a time, transferred out in neat increments. At first, smaller sums, just a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Then larger, bolder withdrawals. All authorized under the power of attorney, all perfectly legal on paper. One email made Angela's hands tremble so violently she almost knocked over her glass. The subject line was simple: funds received. In the body of the message, Michael wrote to Vanessa, "It's done. College savings and reserve funds, everything is ready. Soon we'll be in our new place and Clara will understand. Madison and Olivia will manage without. Our happiness comes first." Angela reeled. He had taken everything, not for bills or debts or emergencies, but to bankroll his new life with another woman. The future of their daughters had been stripped away, parceled out transaction by transaction, until nothing remained. "I thought maybe it was a mistake," Madison whispered. Maybe he was helping her with something work-related. But then the pictures. She clicked to another folder. Angela's breath caught as photo after photo appeared on the screen. Michael and Vanessa at restaurants, in hotel lobbies, his arm slung casually over her shoulder, smiles wide as though they didn't have a family waiting at home. One image showed a rental contract with both of their names on it. Another, a receipt for a down payment on a condo in Seattle. Angela's vision blurred with tears. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice raw. 3 months, Olivia admitted quietly. "We didn't want to tell you until we were sure, but we couldn't let him destroy everything without proof." Angela slumped back in her chair, her body numb. It was one thing to fear betrayal. It was another to see it catalogued in black and white, with timestamps and dollar amounts, proof she could not deny. "You have all this," she whispered. "Everything," Olivia said firmly. "Emails, transfers, contracts, even screenshots of their conversations. We've documented it all." Angela looked from one daughter to the other, torn between anguish and awe. They were only 17, yet they had uncovered the kind of evidence even she, with all her years of bookkeeping, might have overlooked. They hadn't panicked. They hadn't collapsed under the weight of the truth. Instead, they had prepared. The betrayal cut deep, but what stunned her most was the composure in her daughter's eyes. They had faced the unimaginable and met it with steel. Angela wanted to scream, to shatter something, to demand answers from Michael right that moment. But all she could do was sit there, shaking, while the truth settled in her bones. The man she had built a life with for 20 years had been living a lie for 7 months, and her children had known before she did. And worse, this was only the beginning of what they had to show her. Angela's hands were still trembling when Madison and Olivia leaned closer, their voices low, as if confessing a crime. But what they described wasn't recklessness, it was calculation. Madison spoke first. "Once we knew something was wrong, we started watching him. Not in a creepy way, but patterns. His habits, his schedule." She described how Michael's evenings had changed. He claimed long shifts at the construction site, paperwork piling up, client dinners. But Madison noticed details. A shirt freshly pressed when he should have been covered in dust, the faint smell of cologne lingering on his jackets. On days he claimed to be working overtime, his truck wasn't parked at the site when she passed by on the way home. "I kept notes," Madison admitted, sliding a spiral-bound notebook across the table. The pages were filled with dates, times, scribbled observations. "Left house 6:30, no work boots." Said he was in Salem, but his truck was near downtown. "Friday, suit jacket, not uniform vest." Each line painted a picture Angela hadn't wanted to see, but now she couldn't deny. Then Olivia took over, her tone sharper, more technical. "I focused on the digital side. I didn't hack anything, Mom. I didn't need to. Dad's careless. He uses the same password for almost everything. Chrome had it saved. His work email, his personal Gmail, all autofilled." Angela's chest tightened. "I never sent anything," Olivia clarified quickly. "I just copied. Screenshots, PDFs, saved attachments. He printed out bank forms once and left them on the printer tray. I scanned them before he threw them out. And the bank itself? They send confirmation emails for every transfer. He never deleted them." From her backpack, Olivia pulled out a thick folder organized with sticky tabs, bank statements, receipts, emails, photos. She laid it on the table like a case file. Angela stared at it, horrified. "You're just kids. You shouldn't have had to do this." Madison placed a steady hand on her mother's arm. "We didn't want to, but someone had to protect you. Protect us." Angela's eyes filled, torn between gratitude and dread. Olivia clicked her laptop open again and scrolled through images. "And that's how I found something else. Something he doesn't even know. Vanessa, she's not just with Dad. She has another man, a restaurant owner downtown. Rich, older. You can see her tagged in his posts. Expensive dinners, wine tastings. She's with him in public, and with Dad in secret." Angela's breath caught. She's using him?" "Completely," Olivia said flatly. "To her, Dad's just a backup wallet. A plan B. She wants the restaurant guy, but she's milking Dad while she can. Angela pressed her palm to her mouth, reeling. The betrayal was already unbearable. To think her husband wasn't even the center of this affair, but a side investment in another woman's climb. Humiliation burned in her chest like acid. The twins exchanged a look, the kind of silent language siblings share. Olivia leaned back, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Madison sat upright, her jaw tight, eyes dark with resolve. Angela studied them, realization dawning through the fog of her grief. They had worked together, as if conducting a covert operation. One documenting movements in the real world, the other building a digital archive. Evidence stacked upon evidence until the truth was undeniable. 17 years old, and they had done what seasoned investigators might envy. And they had done it for her, for the family Michael had chosen to abandon. Angela's voice cracked. My God, what kind of children do I have? Ones who don't want to see you broken, Madison whispered. Angela turned her gaze to the folder of evidence, the glowing laptop screen, the scrawled notes. The betrayal of her husband cut deeper than she thought possible, but mingled with it was something she hadn't expected. Awe. Her daughters, her girls, still young, still with their lives ahead of them, had seen through lies that Angela herself had missed. They had carried the burden in silence, gathering proof, preparing for this moment. It was horrifying. It was humbling. And it was the only reason she wasn't utterly destroyed right now. Angela pressed her hands together, trying to steady her breath. The storm outside had grown stronger, raindrops streaking the kitchen window. And in that dim light, as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, she realized the truth was no longer buried. It was here, spread out before her, undeniable. And with it came a chilling certainty. This was only the beginning. The folder of evidence sat heavy on the kitchen table, like a weapon waiting to be used. Madison and Olivia leaned forward, their voices low but steady, as if unveiling the blueprint to a mission. We've thought this through, Madison said. It isn't enough to just know the truth. We have to act. If we sit here and do nothing, Dad gets away with it. He builds a new life with her, and we're left with nothing. Angela's heart ached at the hardness in her daughter's tone. You're just 17. This isn't your battle to fight. But Olivia shook her head. It's our future he stole, Mom. That makes it ours, too. And we're not going to let him win. They exchanged a glance. Then Madison whispered the name they had given their plan. Operation Karma. Angela stared, stunned. Her daughters had given their revenge a name. Madison pulled out the notebook again, flipping to a page filled with bullet points and arrows. 3 steps, all timed together. She tapped the paper with her pen, eyes dark with determination. Step 1, she began. We send everything to Dad's company. HR, compliance, whoever handles misconduct. Not about the affair, that's personal, but about how he's used company resources. The gas card, the expense account, even the truck he's supposed to log for site visits. We have receipts that prove he was nowhere near the site on those days. Angela's breath hitched. If the company sees that, they'll suspend him, Olivia finished coldly. At least investigate. At-will employment in Oregon means they don't need much to fire him. We just give them the excuse. Madison flipped to the next page. Step 2. Vanessa. Angela tensed at the name. She's playing both sides, Olivia said. We've collected her pictures with that restaurant owner downtown. The gifts Dad gave her overlap with what she flaunted online. We don't need to do anything extreme. Just make sure he knows she's been lying to him. An anonymous message. Screenshots. Time-stamped receipts. He'll connect the dots. Angela closed her eyes, a wave of humiliation washing over her. To think her husband wasn't even Vanessa's priority, just a side fund. And step 3, Madison said, her voice steady, is where you come in. We've already pulled together everything for a fraud claim with the bank. Dad abused the power of attorney. He went way beyond what he was authorized to do. That makes the transfers disputable. If we go through your lawyer, we can get the accounts frozen. Maybe even have the money returned. Angela's mouth went dry. You already spoke to a lawyer? Not directly, Madison admitted. But Mrs. Jenkins, remember, her son's in my biology class? She's a paralegal at a firm downtown. We asked her what happens when someone abuses POA. She said the bank is required to investigate, especially if there's evidence he forged documents or exceeded his authority. Angela stared at them, torn between horror and awe. Her daughters had been carrying this secret, constructing this plan piece by piece, while she went about her days oblivious. Olivia leaned forward, her tone softening. We're not doing anything illegal, Mom. No hacking, no lies, just giving people the truth. The company, the bank, and Vanessa's sugar daddy. Once they see the evidence, the dominoes will fall. Angela pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders trembling. This is too much for you. You shouldn't have to do this. But we already have, Madison said gently. We've done the work. All that's left is timing it right. Angela lifted her gaze. Timing. Olivia's lips curved into a small, sharp smile. It has to hit him all at once. If we spread it out, he'll wriggle free. But if HR suspends him the same day Vanessa gets exposed and the bank freezes the accounts, he won't have anywhere to run. Angela's chest tightened. She thought of Michael, his temper, his arrogance, the way he dismissed her sacrifices as if they were nothing. She imagined him walking into work to find his career unraveling, checking his phone to find Vanessa gone, opening his account to see it frozen. The image should have frightened her. Instead, for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of relief. Her daughters weren't reckless. They were precise, focused, united. Angela leaned back in her chair, exhaling shakily. Operation Karma, she murmured. What have I raised? Survivors, Madison said. Strategists, Olivia added. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the window panes. It felt like the world itself was echoing the storm building inside their home. Angela's hand still shook, but beneath the fear was something steadier, a glimmer of strength borrowed from her daughters. They had a plan, a terrifying, audacious plan. And tomorrow, Michael Dawson would learn what it felt like when everything he had stolen came crashing down in a single day. The rain was relentless that night in Portland, hammering against the Dawson home as if the sky itself were angry. Angela sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded, her heart pounding in her chest. Madison and Olivia were beside her, calm but alert, waiting. They had set their plan in motion. All that remained was for Michael to walk through the door. When the lock finally turned and the front door slammed open, the sound made Angela flinch, but only for a moment. Michael stormed inside, his face flushed with fury, his jacket dripping rain. He dropped his work bag on the floor, so hard it thudded against the wall. Where is it? He roared, his voice cracking with rage. Where the hell is my money? Angela rose slowly, meeting his eyes across the room. For the first time in years, there was no fear in her gaze. Your money, she said evenly, or the money you stole from your daughters? Michael froze for half a second before his face contorted. Don't you dare accuse me of theft. I had every right. I had power of attorney, Angela. Every transaction was legal. Madison stood, her expression steady. Legal doesn't mean right, Dad. And you didn't just move money. You drained an account meant for our future. Michael's eyes darted to her, then back to Angela. His voice dropped, almost pleading. You don't understand. I was doing this for us. For me and you, Angela. Vanessa and I. He stopped abruptly, realizing his slip. Angela's breath caught, but her face remained calm. Say her name again, she whispered. Go on. He faltered, then tried to backtrack. No, it's not what you think. She needed help. I was investing for us. For a new life. Olivia opened her laptop on the table with a decisive click. A new life, she repeated coldly. Funny, because according to these emails, that new life didn't include Mom. Or us. Just you and Vanessa Carter. She turned the screen toward him. Michael's face drained of color. On the display was a string of messages, affectionate declarations, promises of apartments, plans for vacations. His own words immortalized in black and white. "That's private," he shouted, his voice breaking. "No, Dad," Madison said firmly. She reached for the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "This is evidence." She laid down printed bank statements, one after another, like cards in a rigged game. Transfers from Mom's savings account, thousands at a time, all under your name. Michael's hands shook as he shoved the papers aside. "You don't know what you're talking about. Those were legitimate withdrawals." Angela's voice cut through the chaos, low and controlled. "Legitimate? For hotel rooms? For jewelry? 4 down payments on a condo in Seattle with another woman." Michael's jaw clenched, his chest heaving. He looked cornered like a trapped animal. "I had to, Angela. You never understood me. Vanessa, she believes in me." "She," Olivia interrupted, her tone merciless. "She's already gone, Dad. Did you know that? The man she really wants is a restaurant owner downtown, richer than you'll ever be. She's been using you as her backup wallet." Michael staggered back, the color draining from his face completely. "That's not true," he whispered, but the doubt flickered in his eyes. Madison laid down the final blow. A photocopy of the falsified power of attorney he had attempted to pass off. The notary stamp was inconsistent, the dates mismatched. "And this," she said quietly, "is fraud. You didn't just betray us. You broke the law." Michael's knees seemed to buckle. He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder rolling low and ominous, but inside the kitchen the silence was deafening. Angela stepped closer, her voice sharp as glass. "You can't go to the police. Do you realize that? The second you try to file a report, you'll be admitting you drained your own children's college fund under false pretenses. They'll open an investigation, and it won't be me they question. It'll be you." Michael looked up, his eyes wild, searching for a lifeline. "Angela, please," he begged. "We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can still work this out. Don't do this to me." Angela shook her head slowly. "You did this to yourself." The girls stood on either side of her, silent sentinels, their faces set with the same calm determination that had carried them this far. For once, Michael Dawson, the man who had held power over them for so long, looked small, defeated. The rain beat harder against the windows, but inside, the storm had passed. Angela no longer trembled. The fear that had shadowed her for years was gone, replaced by something stronger, certainty. Michael had gambled their lives on a lie, and now he was losing everything. The house was still humming with the echo of Michael's outburst when Angela finally spoke again. Her voice was calm, deliberate, stripped of fear. Madison and Olivia stood close, their presence like unshakable pillars at her side. "You want to fix this?" Angela asked, her gaze steady on her husband. "Then listen carefully. This is the only way forward." Michael lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale. He looked less like the confident project supervisor he once was, and more like a man cornered, stripped of his power. Angela didn't blink. "You're going to sign divorce papers. This marriage is over." Michael's mouth fell open, but no words came. Angela pressed on, her tone sharp enough to cut through the storm outside. "You will walk away from every financial claim. The house, the savings, the assets, everything. You will sign them over, leave them to me and the girls. And then you will leave. No phone calls, no visits, no contact. If you try to interfere, every piece of evidence we have, every transfer, every message, every forged document will go public. Your company will see it, The police will see it. The court will see it. Michael lurched to his feet, anger flaring again. You can't do that to me. I built this house. I paid those bills. Madison's voice rang out, steady and cold. You stole from us. That money was for college, not for you to throw away on someone who doesn't even want you. Michael turned toward her, his face contorted, but Olivia stepped forward, laptop still open, a dozen incriminating windows glowing on the screen. One click, Dad, she said evenly. One click, and this goes to HR, the bank, and the district attorney. You think you're trapped now. Try explaining forged legal documents to law enforcement. Angela placed a hand on Olivia's arm, steadying her, then faced Michael again. You have no cards left. The only choice you have is whether you go quietly or whether you drag your name through the mud on your way down. But either way, Michael, you are done here. He shook his head, desperation seeping into his voice. Angela, please. 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I was stupid, I was reckless, but I can change. Just don't do this. Her eyes burned, but her voice did not waver. 20 years meant everything to me, but you threw them away. And now the girls, and I will not pay the price for your betrayal. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths as he searched their faces, looking for weakness, for mercy. But Madison and Olivia's expressions mirrored their mother's, unyielding, resolute. Finally, Michael slumped back into the chair, his shoulders collapsing inward. He knew there was no way out. What do you want me to do? His voice was barely audible. Angela straightened, her hands folded in front of her like a verdict being read. Tomorrow morning, you will meet with my attorney. He already has the paperwork prepared. A divorce petition, a financial settlement. You will sign. By the end of the week, this will be filed in court. Michael swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Olivia's finger hovered above her keyboard. Try yes. Michael's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Angela. The fight drained from him all at once. His shoulders sagged, his lips pressed into a thin line. Fine, he muttered. I'll sign. Angela held his gaze, making sure the promise was real. Only when she was certain did she finally exhale. It's over, Michael, she said softly. This family is no longer yours to destroy. Outside, the storm began to fade, the rain tapering off into silence. Inside, Michael Dawson sat broken, while the three women he had underestimated reclaimed the future he had tried to steal. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, appointments, and cautious hope. Portland's skies remained gray, but inside the Dawson home, the air felt lighter than it had in years. Angela carried herself differently now, not with the exhaustion of a woman quietly enduring, but with the steadiness of someone who had survived the storm and was beginning to rebuild. The first letter came from the bank. After reviewing the documents and the falsified power of attorney Michael had used, the fraud department ruled in Angela's favor. Every transfer was reversed. The funds, nearly drained to the last cent, were returned, not to the old joint account, but to a new account created in Angela's name alone. For the first time in weeks, she logged in and saw the balance restored. 17 years of sacrifice had not been lost after all. She printed the confirmation notice and pinned it on the refrigerator, not just as proof of survival, but as a symbol. Her daughters hugged her so tightly that night she nearly wept. It's safe now, she told them. This money will never be touched again except for your future. Michael's downfall arrived just as swiftly. The company's HR department had opened an investigation after receiving the anonymous evidence. Within days, he was called into a meeting with senior managers. At first, he tried to bluster, to deny, but the receipts and mileage logs were irrefutable. Company credit cards, used for dinners and hotels far from any work site. Company time billed while he was photographed elsewhere. By the end of the week, his access badge was disabled. His name was whispered in the hallways, his reputation shredded. The news traveled fast in Portland's construction circles. No one wanted to hire a supervisor caught misusing company resources. Word spread of his pending divorce and the accusations tied to it. The man who once strutted through job sites barking orders now struggled to answer calls from recruiters, calls that never came. And Vanessa? Her glittering facade crumbled just as quickly. The restaurant owner downtown, the one she had flaunted on social media, confronted her with the screenshots and receipts. Dinner reservations she claimed to have paid for were traced back to Michael's stolen funds. Jewelry he thought was exclusive had already been photographed on her wrist weeks before. Humiliated, he cut ties publicly, escorting her out of his life without a backward glance. Her career prospects dimmed overnight. A young assistant with a reputation for entangling herself in scandals wasn't the kind of hire most firms wanted. She lost her position at Michael's company during the investigation and failed to land another. For a woman who thrived on attention and money, the silence of her phone was its own punishment. Meanwhile, Angela and her daughters began to breathe again. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. There were still quiet nights of grief, moments when Angela lay awake replaying 20 years of betrayal, but she wasn't alone in those moments. Madison often studied late at the dining room table, her notebooks spread wide. Olivia coded in her room, the blue glow of her monitor spilling into the hallway. Their presence, steady and unyielding, was Angela's greatest comfort. When the college letters arrived in early spring, they felt like a reward for everything endured. Madison was accepted into a pre-med program with a partial scholarship, her dedication shining through in every line of her application. Olivia received even greater news, a full scholarship for computer science, awarded for her academic record and her independent research project that analyzed online privacy risks. Angela held both acceptance letters in her trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "This," she whispered, "is what that money was meant for, and nothing, no one, will take it away again." The three of them celebrated with a quiet dinner at a small family-owned restaurant downtown. Not a grand gesture, just good food, laughter, and the relief of finally being free. For the first time in years, Angela allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't weighed down by secrecy or fear. Michael was gone. Vanessa was forgotten. And though the scars of betrayal would never disappear completely, Angela had something far stronger to hold on to. The resilience of her daughters, the justice they had carved out of lies, and the certainty that they had not only survived but triumphed. Outside, the Portland rain softened into a gentle drizzle, washing the streets clean. Inside, the Dawson family began again. The spring sun finally broke through Portland's clouds one morning, washing the Dawson home in pale gold. Angela stood by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the light shift across the wet pavement outside. The storm had passed, both outside and in her life. The silence in the house no longer felt heavy. It was peaceful now. Madison's textbooks lay open across the dining table, pages marked with notes and highlighters. Olivia's laptop hummed quietly in her room, a testament to hours of coding and ambition. The two girls filled the house with the steady rhythm of forward motion, of lives already pointed toward the future. Angela thought back to the chaos that had nearly destroyed them. The zeros on her screen, the lies, the betrayal that had threatened to unravel everything she had worked for. For a time, she had believed the only justice that mattered came from judges, courts, or police reports. But in the end, the truth had not been delivered by a gavel. It had been uncovered by two teenage girls who refused to be victims. She marveled at their courage. Madison, with her quiet discipline, who had noticed the smallest cracks in her father's stories. Olivia, bold and relentless, who had pieced together every digital clue. Together, they had done what Angela could not bring herself to face. They had confronted deceit head-on and exposed it for what it was. Justice, Angela realized, did not always roar from a courtroom. Sometimes it was found in whispered conversations between sisters, in the determination of young women who refused to be silenced, in the quiet strength of a mother who finally stopped being afraid. That night, Angela cooked dinner for the three of them. Nothing extravagant, just pasta and fresh bread, but the table was filled with laughter, stories from school, and the kind of warmth that had been absent for far too long. She looked at her daughters, so strong, so unyielding, and felt something deeper than pride. She felt safe. They had survived Michael's betrayal. More than that, they had emerged stronger than before. He had tried to strip them of stability, of dignity, of a future. Instead, he had revealed the depth of their resilience. He had shown Angela the kind of women her daughters were becoming. Intelligent, brave, and unafraid of the truth. When the meal was done, Angela leaned back in her chair, her eyes lingering on their faces. "I used to think justice only came from the law," she said softly, "but now I know better. Justice came from you too, from your courage, from your love for me, and for each other." The girls smiled, and Madison reached across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. "We just wanted to protect you," she said. Angela's throat tightened. "And you did. You saved me." In that moment, the house felt whole again. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. The lies had been stripped away, and what remained was unbreakable. As the evening settled in, Angela allowed herself one last reflection. Life had shown her the cruelty of betrayal, the sharp edge of deception wielded by someone she once trusted above all others. But life had also shown her something stronger, the power of love, of intelligence, of courage in the face of heartbreak. Michael's choices had nearly destroyed them. Vanessa's schemes had humiliated them. Yet neither could stand against the bond of three women determined to reclaim their lives. Angela carried that thought with her as she turned off the kitchen lights and followed her daughters upstairs. Tomorrow would bring exams, college decisions, and the ordinary challenges of life, but she no longer feared them. She had faced something far worse and come out standing. In her heart, she knew the truth. Betrayal might cut deep, but it was love, intellect, and bravery that carved the path forward. And together, those forces could shatter even the most ruthless deception. The storm was behind them. The future was theirs. The bar was dim, quiet, and nearly empty, just the way I needed it to be. I sat there with a half-full glass of red wine, my second that night, maybe third. I'd lost count. Strangely, I wasn't tipsy. Not even close. The alcohol refused to touch the gnawing storm inside me. I wasn't drinking to celebrate or unwind. I was drinking to numb, but the numbness wouldn't come. Not tonight. Not after what I'd heard just hours earlier. If this had been any other evening, I might have admired the rustic charm of the place, the warm, minimalist design, the soft glow of pendant lights casting a gentle amber over wood and stone. But today, nothing could reach me. Nothing could penetrate the fog that had settled over my brain, thick and paralyzing. It was supposed to be a routine checkup, just a quick lunchtime visit to the company clinic, part of the standard health screening for employees. I remember tapping my foot impatiently in the waiting room, annoyed that the nurse was running behind. I had emails to answer, reports to review, and barely enough time to grab a sandwich before the next meeting. I didn't expect anything more than a few stamps and signatures on a form, but then the doctor called me in and said, "We need to talk." He was an older man, gray around the temples, eyes too gentle for the words he was about to say. He asked me to sit, and that's when the world began to unravel. Breast cancer, aggressive, already spreading to the lymph nodes. He didn't sugarcoat it, which I appreciated in a detached, twisted sort of way. He laid it out plainly: surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. 6 months if I delayed, 9 if I was lucky, a year at best, if everything went right. I heard the words. I nodded when he paused. I even thanked him before leaving his office, but none of it felt real. It was like watching a movie where I was both the main character and a dispassionate observer. I walked back to the office, sat at my desk, and typed numbers into spreadsheets like a ghost. The truth didn't hit me until I got home that evening. The moment I shut the front door behind me, the air in the apartment felt heavier, staler. I stood in the hallway, still holding my purse, staring into the shadows of a life I'd built. Brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, for a family that had long stopped seeing me. My husband, Andrew, was sprawled on the couch in his usual spot, eyes glued to the television, controller in hand. He didn't even glance at me when I came in. "Dinner," he mumbled, barely audible over the sound of gunfire from his game. I didn't answer. I just kept walking until I reached the bedroom, locked the door, and let the first tear fall. Not because I was dying. Not yet. But because I'd spent 20 years keeping this family afloat, dragging a lifeless marriage behind me like dead weight, convincing myself that things would eventually get better, that somehow, someday I'd be seen. And now, with a silent killer growing inside me, I realized no one had ever really looked. No one but me. I returned to the bar hours later, dressed in the same work clothes, now wrinkled and tight around my chest, where the tumor had made its quiet home. And here I was, swirling wine in a glass, pretending that something, anything, might dull the sound of that doctor's voice in my head. 6 months, maybe 9. That's all the time I had left. Andrew hadn't always been this way. Or maybe he had, and I just didn't want to see it. When we first met, he was charming in that easy, unthreatening kind of way. He had this boyish smile, a guitar slung over his shoulder, and a softness to his voice that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He could talk about literature and music and made you believe he had depth. I was in my early 20s, working my way through accounting school, living on canned soup and hope. And he was beautiful in a way that made struggle feel worth it. But beauty fades, and so does charm. What remains is character, and Andrew didn't have any. He moved in with me before we even got married, said his lease was up, and I was too in love to say no. At the time, I thought we were building something. But really, I was the one building, and he was just there. Always there. Playing video games. Reading self-help books he never finished. Watching videos about how to manifest success. But not once did he ever go out and actually look for a job. Not seriously. The only time he ever showed any real motivation was when he found some online business course claiming to teach you how to make 6 figures from home. He begged me to cover the cost. $2,000 we didn't have. He promised it would change everything. It didn't. 2 weeks later, he called it a scam and went back to the couch like nothing had happened. I was the one who paid off that credit card, just like I paid for the rent, the groceries, the bills, the furniture, even the damn gaming console he spent most of his waking hours glued to. When our daughter, Lena, was born, it was me who got up at 3 a.m. for feedings, me who went back to work after 8 weeks so we wouldn't fall behind on the mortgage, me who handled every doctor's appointment, every school meeting, every scraped knee and fever. Andrew, he'd bring me a glass of water now and then, maybe heat up leftovers. And every time he acted like he'd just rescued me from a burning building. His mother, Margaret, never once saw anything wrong with him. She called him my sweet boy, well into his 30s, and every time we argued, she'd be on the phone within the hour. "Helen, he's just sensitive," she'd say. "You need to encourage him, not criticize." Encourage what? His high scores on Xbox? After years of begging her to help him get on his feet, Margaret finally pulled some strings and got him a job with the city, assisting visiting dignitaries. It was the perfect setup, schmoozing, dressing nice, pretending to matter. But even that he managed to screw up. Called a mayor's young wife his daughter. Forgot to notify hotel staff about, well, a situation involving a guest and a woman who wasn't his wife. It wasn't long before he was let go. Too much liability, they said. After that, he just gave up entirely. He stopped pretending. He'd wake up at noon, shuffle around in sweatpants, and complain about the noise from the construction across the street. Meanwhile, I was clocking 60 hours a week, keeping the lights on. Once, I tried to lay down the law. Told him he'd be responsible for cleaning and making dinner. He waved his hand like he was granting me a royal favor. Sure, babe. No problem. That lasted 3 days. Even Lena noticed. At 20, she was already juggling school and a part-time job, but she still managed to do more around the house than her father. One night, after a long shift, she came home to find me scrubbing the kitchen floor. She looked at Andrew, lounging on the couch, and said flatly, if you're going to be useless, at least don't be in the way. He didn't respond, just paused his game, looked at her, then back at the screen. That was when I realized my daughter had grown up watching me carry this entire family, and she was already learning not to make the same mistake. Lena was my only child, my one quiet miracle in a life that had become painfully predictable. I gave birth to her in the middle of a snowstorm, in a rundown hospital on the south side of Chicago, while Andrew paced the hallway like a nervous actor playing the role of concerned husband. He held her once, maybe twice, then quickly returned to whatever distraction waited on his phone. But I didn't care. She was mine. Her tiny fists, her squinting eyes, the way she grasped my finger like she knew. I was all she had. From the beginning, I promised myself she would never feel the kind of loneliness I'd felt growing up. She would never question whether she mattered. I worked overtime to keep her in private school as long as I could. I skipped lunch for years just to save up for her violin lessons. Every report card, every honor roll ribbon, every tiny win, those were my oxygen. And she didn't disappoint. Lena was bright, driven, sharp-witted in ways that reminded me of my younger self before the weight of marriage and bills and broken promises dulled my edges. She got into a good university, just outside the city, majoring in public administration. She wanted to work in government. Real change starts from inside, Mom, she told me once. Her eyes shone like she actually believed it. God, how I envied that kind of hope. She worked part-time at a flower shop run by a friend of ours to help cover her books. She never complained, not once, even when her feet hurt or when her manager scheduled her back-to-back with midterms. That girl just kept going, kept trying. I watched her from the kitchen table late at night, bent over her laptop, earbuds in, mouthing sentences to herself as she prepared presentations. She had her father's patience for detail, but none of his laziness. All her fire came from me. But despite her strength, Lena still carried a softness in her voice when she asked, "How are you doing, Mom?" She didn't mean the routine kind of "how are you" people toss around. She meant it. She watched me. She saw the circles under my eyes and the tension in my jaw when I opened the bills. I'd always told myself I stayed with Andrew for her, that having a father, even a useless one, was better than none. That maybe, just maybe, she needed the image of a full home more than she needed truth. But she saw through it. Long before I was ready to admit it to myself, Lena had already decided she'd never follow in my footsteps. When she brought home her boyfriend, Val, for the first time, I was skeptical. Another boy who dressed like he just rolled out of bed, soft-spoken and slightly awkward. But he had this quiet integrity. He listened when people spoke. He didn't try to impress me, just treated my daughter with warmth and respect. Still, I warned her, "You want a life like mine?" I asked, "You want a man who sits on the couch while you break your back to feed him?" She smiled. "Val's not like that, Mom. He actually shows up." Andrew, of course, hated Val. Said he was soft. Said Lena could do better. Ironic, coming from a man who hadn't held a real job in 2 decades. One night, Lena clapped back, "Don't worry, Dad. I'm not trying to marry someone like you." I should have said something. Should have softened the blow. But instead, I swallowed my pride and kept stirring the soup, pretending I didn't just witness my daughter reclaim her voice in the very house that had silenced mine for years. It happened on a Tuesday night just after dinner. I'd barely touched my plate, some leftover pasta I reheated more out of habit than hunger. Andrew had eaten like a man who'd worked a full shift, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. and asked if we were out of cookies. That was it. That was the extent of our interaction that day. I stood at the sink, staring down at the greasy dishes, my hand submerged in lukewarm water. The hum of the dishwasher mixed with the sounds of gunfire from the living room, where Andrew was already back in front of his game. And something snapped. I dried my hand slowly, walked into the living room, and stood in front of the TV. He didn't even look up, just leaned to the side, trying to see past me. "Can you move?" he said, eyes fixed on the screen. "I went to the doctor today," I said quietly. That got his attention. He paused the game and looked up with exaggerated annoyance. "Yeah? What for?" I took a breath that burned going down. "I have cancer." For a second, nothing. Then he blinked. "What kind?" "Breast. It's spread. Stage 3. I'll need surgery, chemo, the whole thing." He made a face like I'd just told him the washing machine broke. "Jesus, that sucks." "That's it." I asked, voice trembling. "That's all you have to say?" He shrugged. "What do you want me to do, Helen? Cry?" I stared at him, at the man I'd once married, at the pile of blankets he'd wrapped himself in like royalty. And I heard my own voice crack, more with disbelief than emotion. "I might die, Andrew." He sighed like I was being dramatic. "You won't. You're too stubborn. People like you live forever just to drive the rest of us crazy." And that was it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply turned around, walked into our bedroom, grabbed a laundry basket, and started pulling his clothes from the closet. Shirt after shirt, sock after sock, everything he owned. I moved like someone possessed. "What the hell are you doing?" he called from the hallway. "Freeing myself," I muttered. By the time he caught up to me, I was already out on the balcony, launching his belongings over the railing. It wasn't graceful. His boxers fluttered in the wind like ridiculous white flags. A couple walking their dog stopped and stared as a hoodie landed at their feet. I didn't care. I wanted the world to see. Let them all watch me purge the years I'd wasted. Andrew tried to grab my arm. "Have you lost your mind?" I jerked away, eyes blazing. "Get out. Tonight." "You're being insane," he sputtered. "You need help." "No, Andrew. What I need is space to breathe without stepping over your dirty socks. I need peace. I need to survive. And I can't do that with you draining the air from this apartment like a goddamn parasite." He stood there, stunned, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then he did the only thing he'd ever learned to do. He called his mother. "Mama," he said, his voice shaky. "She's lost it. She's throwing my stuff off the balcony. Come get me." I slammed the door before he could finish. And for the first time in over 20 years, I felt clean. It didn't take long. Maybe 45 minutes after Andrew made the call, I heard heavy footsteps storming down the hall. Margaret didn't knock. She pounded. 3 short, violent bursts like she was the police. I opened the door, and there she was, face red, curls bouncing from the force of her indignation. Coat slipping off one shoulder like she'd rushed out of the house in a blind rage. "What the hell is going on here?" she barked, eyes darting past me into the apartment. "Andrew says you've lost your damn mind." I didn't flinch. "He can explain that to you while he's picking his socks out of the bushes." She shoved past me into the living room, arms flailing like she owned the place. "I knew it. I knew something was off with you. My poor son. He gives you the best years of his life, and this is how you repay him." I almost laughed. The best years of his life? Margaret, your son has been living off me like a barnacle for 2 decades. He was trying. He has potential. He just needed more time. He's had 20 years. She paused, took a breath, and lowered her voice in that condescending, overly controlled way she always used when trying to regain power. "Helen, sweetheart, I know marriage can be hard, but this drama, it isn't necessary. You've always been the stable one." "Oh, I'm still stable," I said coolly, "which is why I know I don't want to spend whatever time I have left babysitting a grown man." Her face twitched. What do you mean, time you have left? I folded my arms. I have cancer, Margaret. Stage 3. They found it in my lymph nodes. For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. I don't know if it was pity or disbelief or fear, but it passed. And then, in a voice so calm it chilled me, she said, "So, if something happens to you, the apartment goes to Andrew, right?" I blinked. Are you serious? Well, I mean, you wouldn't want him to be homeless. After all, this is his home too. No, Margaret. It's my home. I paid for it. Every square foot. And don't worry, I've already filed for divorce. The paperwork is in. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You can't be serious. I'm more serious now than I've ever been. After all we've done for you. What you've done, I snapped, stepping closer, is raise a man who can't wash a dish or hold a job. What you've done is treat me like a caretaker, not a wife. And now that I'm sick, you think you can swoop in and claim what's mine. Margaret's lips trembled, but she didn't cry. That woman was made of vinegar and pride. You'll regret this, she hissed. Mark my words. I've regretted a lot of things, I said, opening the door wide, but putting myself first won't be one of them. She stood there, stunned, then finally turned and stormed out. I watched her waddle down the hall, her heels clicking against the tile like angry punctuation. The door shut behind her with a satisfying click, and I exhaled like I hadn't breathed in years. I was still sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at the empty doorway after Margaret left when I heard another knock. This one was soft, hesitant. I already knew it was Lena. Only my daughter knocked like that, like she was asking permission to enter a world she already belonged to. Mom, she called out as I opened the door. Her face was pale, eyes red and puffy, like she'd been crying the whole way over. She stepped inside without waiting for me to speak, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. Dad called me, she blurted. He said you threw him out, that you've gone crazy, and then he said something about you being sick. I didn't answer right away. I just led her to the kitchen, sat down at the small table where I used to help her with math homework, where we folded holiday napkins together every Thanksgiving. The apartment was still a mess, clothes strewn everywhere, the air heavy with the scent of lavender cleaner I'd used out of habit. Everything felt wrong, but she was here. And suddenly I wasn't as scared. She sat across from me, her voice cracking. Please don't lie to me, Mom. Are you really sick? I nodded slowly. Yes, I have breast cancer. Stage 3. It's spread to my lymph nodes. Lena's face crumpled. She reached for my hand across the table, gripping it with the same fierce desperation she'd had as a child when she fell and scraped her knees. But this time, I couldn't just kiss it and make it better. How bad is it? She whispered. I looked her straight in the eyes. It's bad, but I'm not giving up. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stood up and wrapped her arms around me, pressing her face into my shoulder like she was trying to disappear into my skin. I can't lose you, she whispered. You're all I have. I held her tightly, feeling the full weight of her trembling body. My little girl, the one I raised alone in every way that mattered. And now she was the one holding me up. Then, suddenly, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. Her lips trembled again, but this time with something more than grief. There's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I furrowed my brow. What is it? I'm pregnant. The words landed like thunder in a quiet room. I blinked. You're what? She nodded quickly, tears still in her eyes. It's early. Just a few weeks. I was going to wait to tell you until things settled down, but now I need you to know. For a long moment, I just stared at her. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't expected joy to enter my life again. Not like this. And yet it did. It rushed in like sunlight breaking through a storm cloud. It warmed every frozen corner of me. You're going to have a baby, I whispered. Lena nodded. And you're going to be a grandmother. A laugh escaped me, raw and breathless. Well, hell, guess I'd better not die then. She smiled through her tears, reaching for my hands again. No, you better not. And just like that, I had something to live for. The next morning, I called my doctor and said the words I'd been avoiding for weeks. I'm ready to fight. I scheduled the surgery and told them I didn't care how soon it had to be. I wanted it done. The moment Lena told me she was pregnant, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't preparing to die anymore. I was preparing to live. But before I could focus on healing, I needed to fix one more thing. Something I'd ignored for years out of fear, out of habit, out of that constant voice in my head saying I wasn't worth more than what I had. That Monday, I walked into work, not just as Helen, the dependable accountant, but as Helen Carter, a woman who had survived things no spreadsheet could calculate. My hands were trembling when I knocked on my boss's office door. Mr. Daniels barely looked up from his screen when I stepped in. Helen, I thought you were on leave. I'm taking a medical leave starting next week, I said firmly. But before I go, I need to talk to you. He raised an eyebrow. All right. I took a deep breath. I've been here 9 years. I've never taken more than a few sick days. I've handled every quarterly crisis, fixed mistakes other people made, worked weekends without complaining, and I've never once asked for a raise. He leaned back, watching me now. I need a raise, I said, not just for the money, for the principle, for the work I've done and the value I bring. There was a long pause. Then he nodded slowly. All right, Helen, I'll see what we can do. I left his office with my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. But under the nerves was a quiet pride, like something long buried inside me had finally stood up straight. Over the next few days, as I prepped for surgery, I felt lighter than I had in years. Andrew was gone. Margaret had stopped calling. The apartment was mine again, quiet and full of small comforts I'd forgotten. Sunlight in the mornings, clean sheets that smelled like lavender, a vase of daisies from Lena that sat proudly by the window. And then there was Eric Lawson. He worked in IT. Quiet, smart, always polite. He'd fixed my computer at least half a dozen times over the years, and every time he did, he'd ask me how I was doing, not in that empty, polite way people usually did, but like he really wanted to know. After Andrew left, Eric started bringing me coffee in the mornings. At first, I thought it was just kindness. Then he offered to drive me home after a particularly late shift. We started talking, really talking, about our lives, our regrets, the things we'd hoped for and let go of. He never pushed, never flirted, just listened, respected the space I needed. Until one night, when we found ourselves sitting outside my building in his old Toyota, the radio playing soft jazz, my hand resting just inches from his on the center console. I looked at him, really looked at him, the gentle lines by his eyes, the warmth in his smile. And something inside me stirred, something I thought had died a long time ago. I reached out, touched his face, and kissed him. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fireworks. It was better. It was real. It was quiet and steady and full of all the things I had forgotten love could be. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I slept knowing that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of my story weren't over yet. After the surgery, everything slowed down. The city buzz that had once pressed against my chest like a weight was replaced by quiet fields, slow mornings, and the rhythmic hum of cicadas in the afternoon. I left Chicago behind for a while and returned to the small town where I grew up, where my mother still lived in the same white cottage with blue shutters and wild roses climbing the porch rail. Mom, Tamara Nichols, welcomed me home like I was a little girl again. No questions, no judgment, just her arms wide open and her famous chicken soup already simmering on the stove. "You look tired," she said as she helped me out of the car. "I am," I admitted, but not just from the surgery. She touched my cheek gently. "Then rest. Let the quiet mend what life broke." And that's exactly what I did. Her house smelled like old books and lemon oil. and the creaky floorboards felt familiar beneath my feet. I slept in my childhood bedroom, now lined with faded wallpaper and shelves filled with dusty paperbacks. At night, I could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside and Mom humming to herself as she folded laundry or watered her plants. During the day, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, watching the sky change colors. It was like the world had paused just for me, to let me breathe, to let me remember who I was before I became someone else's caretaker, before I forgot my own name under the weight of duty. One morning, while walking down the main street with Mom, we ran into Valerie Dempsey, my old high school friend who had become a literature teacher. She still had the same bright eyes, the same warm laugh. She hugged me like no time had passed and insisted we grab coffee at the town diner. Later that week, I saw Toni Mitchell, mother of 5, chaos embodied, and still somehow one of the most grounded people I'd ever known. She handed me a bag of homemade blueberry muffins and said, "Eat something that doesn't come from a hospital tray. You're still Helen, not some porcelain doll." We sat on her porch swing while her youngest built towers with wooden blocks at our feet. We talked about our kids, about the things life had stolen and the things we'd learned to reclaim. There was something healing in those conversations, something real and earthy and unpolished. No pity, no awkward silences, just friends, mothers, women who had weathered storms and still stood tall. In those moments, I felt my body begin to heal, but more importantly, my heart began to loosen. The tight knot of fear, anger, and exhaustion slowly unwound. I stopped flinching at the sound of my phone ringing. I started smiling without forcing it. I laughed, really laughed, until tears rolled down my cheeks and my ribs ached. And every night before bed, Mom would sit beside me, brush my hair like she used to when I was a child, and say, "You're still here. That means there's still more joy waiting for you." I believed her. For the first time in years, I truly believed her. It started with nausea, sharp and persistent. At first, I thought it was the lingering effects of chemotherapy or maybe my body's reaction to the new medications. I had just begun feeling like myself again. My energy was returning in small but meaningful bursts. The walks around the block with Mom no longer left me winded. Food tasted normal again. Life was no longer colorless, but the nausea wouldn't go away. It came in waves, always in the morning, then sometimes at night. I brushed it off at first. Then came the fatigue, bone-deep, inexplicable exhaustion. Probably just my body still healing, I told myself. But a whisper in the back of my mind nagged louder with each passing day. One evening, while I was folding laundry with Mom, the smell of her lavender fabric softener suddenly made my stomach churn. I dropped the warm towel in my hands, ran to the bathroom, and threw up. When I returned, pale and shaken, Mom looked at me carefully. "Helen," she said slowly, "when was your last period?" I froze. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. With the surgery, the treatments, the stress, I had lost track completely. I blinked. I don't know. She set down the basket, walked over to me, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Honey, maybe it's time to take a test." It felt ridiculous. I was 42. I had cancer. I just had part of my reproductive system surgically removed. Pregnancy was not even in the realm of possibility, or so I thought. The next morning, I sat in a cold clinic room in Flagstaff, waiting for the doctor to return. The seconds stretched out like hours. I wasn't sure what answer I feared more, something new being wrong, or something entirely unplanned. When the doctor walked in with a strange smile and said, "Congratulations, Helen. You're about 6 to 7 weeks pregnant," the room tilted. Pregnant. I stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. That can't be right. But it was. My mind spun with questions, shock, and disbelief. After everything, after a diagnosis that nearly ended me, after surgery, radiation, the emotional fallout, the grief, I was pregnant. The doctor explained it gently. "Your treatments didn't remove your entire reproductive system. It's rare, but not impossible. The timing, well, it only takes one window." And I knew that one window had opened the night I kissed Eric back, let him into my heart and into my life. I walked out of that clinic and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, breathing in and out slowly. Pregnant, at 42, after cancer. Tears spilled down my cheeks, not from fear, but from something deeper. Maybe. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet. I thought I had lost everything. But life had quietly left a gift on my doorstep. One I never dared ask for. One I never expected. I stared at his name on my phone screen for a long time. Eric Lawson. My fingers hovered, hesitated, then retreated more times than I could count. I wasn't sure what I expected from him, or what I even wanted. All I knew was that he deserved to know. So I texted him, "Would you meet me for coffee tomorrow afternoon? There's something I need to tell you." He replied almost instantly, "Of course. Just say where." We chose a quiet little spot on the corner of 7th and Maple, neutral ground, not too close to work, not too intimate either. A place where conversations could breathe but not echo. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered chamomile tea, and picked the table near the window. The late autumn light was warm but fading, casting long shadows across the floor. My hands trembled slightly as I cupped the mug. Eric arrived right on time. He was dressed simply, dark jeans, a gray jacket, that same calm presence he always carried like a second skin. He smiled when he saw me, and suddenly everything felt both terrifying and safe at once. "Hey," he said, taking the seat across from me. "You look good." I gave a small laugh. Better than a few months ago. We talked for a few minutes, nothing heavy. Work, the weather, a mutual colleague's questionable taste in holiday sweaters. I let the silence linger once the small talk faded. He didn't push. He waited. Finally I said it. "I'm pregnant." His eyebrows rose. A beat passed, then another. "I'm about 7 weeks along," I continued. "I went to the doctor yesterday." I didn't say the rest out loud, but I could see he understood. The math wasn't complicated. His mouth parted slightly. Still no words came. He looked at me, not with fear, not with panic, but something far deeper, a kind of stunned tenderness, like he'd stumbled upon a miracle he hadn't even known he needed. "I'm not asking anything from you," I added quickly. I thought you should know. That's all." He reached across the table, slowly, as if he wasn't sure I'd let him. His fingers brushed mine, warm, steady. Still no words, but his eyes met mine, and in that gaze there was everything. A promise, a beginning, and something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. I stayed behind after Eric left. The cafe had thinned out, and the golden light outside had turned dusky, brushing the window panes in soft lavender. I sat there with my empty teacup, staring at the swirl of steam that no longer rose. The quiet settled around me like a blanket, not heavy, not suffocating, just still. My fingers rested on my stomach. It still didn't feel real. A child, at my age, after everything. I thought of Lena, her face when she told me she was pregnant, how fiercely she clung to me, how terrified and brave she'd been all at once. Soon, I would hold my grandchild in my arms, and months later, maybe, God willing, I'd hold my own baby too. I thought of Margaret's face twisted in entitlement, demanding I leave everything behind for her son. I thought of Andrew, of his blank indifference as I dragged my body through chemotherapy and he asked what was for dinner. And I thought of the night I'd stared at the bathroom mirror, bald and pale and hollow-eyed, wondering if it would be easier to just slip away quietly. But I didn't. I chose to fight, not for anyone else, not for validation or pity, but for me, for the version of me who deserved a full, vivid life. And now, I chose to live not just for myself, but for the little life growing inside me, and for the tiny one soon to be born into the world through my daughter, a grandmother, a mother, a woman reborn. When I finally stood, the wind outside had picked up. I wrapped my coat tighter, stepped out onto the Chicago sidewalk, and felt the weight of the past months lift slightly with each step. That night, I stood by the window in my apartment, the same apartment that once felt like a prison, filled with bitterness and silence. Now it felt different. The city lights blinked in the distance. Somewhere beyond the hum of traffic and the rhythm of footsteps below, life kept moving. And so would I. I pressed my palm to the glass, then to my belly. No more surviving. No more shrinking. No more silence. I chose life. For real this time. And I wasn't going back. Not ever.